Hi, and welcome back to the Joy of Tennis Teaching. I'm Dan Obashan, and I appreciate all the comments and views that we got on last week's very interesting topic about the values and character traits to succeed in tennis. I apologize, we had a little production problem on the lighting, and thanks for those of you that pointed that out to me. So today we're back outside in Indian Wells, and I'm very excited about today's topic. Today we're going to talk about how to develop rapport between the student and the teacher. Now, the way that I define rapport in tennis teaching is it's creating an environment where the ease of communication between the teacher and student works smoothly. The best way to do this, to create this rapport, is by asking questions. You as the teacher you must take the lead and ask these questions. The student might be nervous if it's a new teaching opportunity. They're focused on their game. It really is your responsibility as the teacher to ask questions. And what do I mean by asking questions? Well, just that. When the student arrives, you ask them where they're from, you ask them what they hope to accomplish in the lesson, you ask them what their current strengths and weaknesses are in their game. There's an endless amount of questions that you can ask, but I would also like to get into the motivation behind these questions. There are two individuals that I've gotten to know throughout my career. One was my teacher, Peter Burwash, and the other was one of my very best students, a man named Jeff Artoon. These were the two best questioners I've ever met. I observed Jeff, when he came to Bighorn Golf Club, really go out of his way to meet people and ask questions. Jeff could go into a room, and by the end of a lunch or a cocktail party, Jeff would know the whole life story of almost everybody in that room. He was remarkable at asking questions about that individual so that they would, open up and Jeff would learn about them. And because of that, these people all liked Jeff. He developed friendships faster than anybody I've ever observed, and I really admired him for that skill. Peter Burwash's questioning was a little bit different. Peter's questioning was more for information. Peter wanted to ask questions to learn about this. Dave Kensler, a viewer and great friend of mine, he and I have talked for years about Peter's ability with asking questions, and we often joke that Peter had a black belt and one more question. I can vividly remember one time, the first time I traveled coaching a professional tennis player at a series of overseas tournaments, and we were in Nairobi, Kenya, and I was having some trouble communicating on a certain issue with my player. And this was back in the late 80s, and communication around the world wasn't as easy as it is today. But we had arranged times for me to check in and talk to Peter, because Peter had also coached Andrew Schneider, and as a matter of fact, Peter's the one that kind of forced me into coaching a professional player and traveling with Andrew. So we arrange this time, we make the phone call, and I get on with Peter and I unload, and I'm going on and on about all the problems I'm having with getting Andrew to do the things that I'm asking him to do. And I'm going on and on and on, looking for Peter to support and give me the magic answer. And at the end of all my begging and talking, Peter said to me, "Who's playing the matches?" And I was like, what the heck does that have to do with anything? Peter didn't give me an answer. He asked the question. But the purpose of the question was for me to understand that I was not looking at it from my player's point of view. I was trying to get my player to do something instead of asking him what he wanted to accomplish, and then using my knowledge to help him accomplish that. So that was one of the great lessons in questioning that I learned from Peter Burwash. So let's get back to the types of questions, again, to build that rapport. If it's in a tennis lesson situation, what we want to do is ask some questions so we can get to the core beliefs of the player. A question that I always would use, and I loved asking players this, I would say, if you could just magically improve one part of your game right this second, just by saying it, no work at all, what would it be? This question, sometimes players would have to think about it a little bit, but it would always get us to the point where we would find out what the biggest wish, what did the player want to achieve? And sometimes if you ask them what they want to achieve, they give you a very generic answer. But if you give them that, if you could just magically improve something, you can open up that thinking a little bit. So how do you build your questioning? I think one of the first things is to understand that everybody learns in a different way. There are three primary learning styles. If you look back in some of my earlier videos, I talked a lot about the visual learner, the audio intellectual learner, and the kinesthetic learner. And I wanted to be a coach from very early in high school. I actually imagined I was going to be a basketball coach before I started teaching tennis. And one of the oldest coaching maxims is whenever you're coaching a sport, you have to do three things: show, tell, do. Show reaches a visual learner, tell reaches the audio intellectual learner, and having the people do it is the kinesthetic learner. And in sports, we have to hit all three. But every student has a primary pathway that they respond to best. I'm an audio intellectual learner, and so I tend to teach in that style. So the students that I get on the same wavelength right away are the audio intellectual learners, those people that like to understand. They want it all explained to them before they try it. The visual learners, you have to be strong with your demonstration skills. You want to be able to demonstrate so that the visual learner will get it, and then you de-emphasize the explanation. I've had visual learners who've kind of rolled their eyes and said, "Are you going to keep talking?" You have to understand how your student learns. The kinesthetic learners, again, they have to do it before they can understand it. So how can we find out what type of learner you have? There's actually a whole science for this called neuro-linguistic programming, NLP. The performance guru Tony Robbins has built his career based around a lot of NLP principles. So if you ask a student something, listen to how they answer you. If you say, "What was your greatest achievement in tennis?" and they say, "Oh, the roar of the crowd, the people were cheering. I could just hear the sound of the ball when I was hitting it. The wind was whistling." All these things are clues for an audio intellectual learner. If they explain very cut and dry, "I had a game plan, I was going to attack the backhand and come into the net as often as possible, and then try to play short volleys because I knew my opponent didn't move forward well." Good chance they're an audio intellectual learner. And if they start talking about the feel of the ball on the racket, the feel of the grip in their hand, the way they moved on the court and how it felt to them, they use feeling words, they're probably a kinesthetic learner. So when you're first getting to know your student, try to ask questions and listen to the answer to try to figure out what kind of learner they are. Once you know what kind of learner they are, then you can tailor your communication to establish the best rapport possible. So asking questions is a big part of it, but listening to the answers is another very, very important quality that you have to develop as a tennis teacher. Peter Burwash, probably the greatest compliment he gave me in our last conversation was we were talking about this idea of questioning. And you had to ask Peter questions all the time. He made sure of that. And Peter said to me, he said, I always felt like you asked questions because you really wanted to know the answer. And I thought, well, yeah, I did. And he said, a lot of times people ask questions because they were supposed to ask questions. So don't be that teacher who asks a question because you heard on a video you were supposed to ask questions. Ask questions to learn the information. Ask questions to understand your student. Listen to their answers and build that rapport right from the first hello at the desk when you're heading out to the court. This topic is a big one, and we'll return to it very often in the coming weeks and months. But please let me know what you think, because I believe one of the key skills to becoming a great teacher is to build rapport with your students. And that'll be all for today. Again, thank you for viewing The Joy of Tennis Teaching.